Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
It's my privilege and pleasure today to introduce two colleagues that I met at the Calico conference 2 years ago and then again this year. So this first Soon-Hee Lee, who's an assistant professor at Wellesley College, and she's just interested in her research in Korean linguistics, has worked a lot in teaching Korean, and so is also interested in developing automatic methods to help learners of Korean. Sok-Bae Young is from Brigham Young University, is a visiting lecturer there.
Chang.
Chang, sorry.
It's confusing, I know.
Because I always use the first name, so he's a visiting lecturer at Brigham Young University and is also interested in Korean linguistics, Korean language processing, and the development of automatic learners tools for learning Korean. And also of course, both of them work in corpora annotation, and we'll hear a little bit about that. The third collaborator in this work is Marcus Dickinson from Indiana University, who's not here. The title of the talk is Developing an Annotated Korean Learner Corpus and an Automatic Analysis of Learner Language. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So today I'm going to just introduce three of us actually have been doing for a couple of years, and we started actually separately as an individual, just with individual research interest, but somehow we got merged into one, and then we formed a research group and started to work on like automatic processing of learner errors. So today I'm going to just talk about general goals of our study and introduce you. We specifically working on the special area called ICALL, which is Intelligent Computer Assisted Language Learning field. And then, how many of you heard of a CALL system? Yeah, okay, so audaciously we put intelligent call, which made other people working on call quite annoyed, which is true. So let me explain later what's actually intelligent call, and usage, and I will briefly talk about what's the usage of learner corpus, because we are developing annotated learner corpus. And then since we are working on specifically the language Korean, and then I think I need to introduce some background in order to make our project understood. So I will briefly talk about the background in Korean. And then Sok-Bae and I will introduce the two pilot studies we have been working for the last couple of years. And then the last we're going to introduce what we found so far, and then in what direction we're going to move next few years. Okay? And the short-term goal is that actually developing annotated learner corpus and then provide annotation scheme that can be used as a sort of golden standard for markup errors in Korean language corpus. But since we're working on the Korean, but just the Korean is quite similar to Japanese, so it's not only the one language specific project. And then we try to find useful properties of some resourceful markup system that can facilitate automatic error detection process and provide also resource for the Korean language teaching actually, so that people can use in the language teaching place. And then long-term goal is to build up the Korean intelligent computer-assisted language learning system, which is actually very far from now. So CALL is actually, you can think of it, it's just using the computer in order to teach language. So we can use PowerPoint or other softwares in order to make language learners excited. However, the intelligent call is more like a little bit more improved call system, so that we can actually provide intelligent feedback to the learner, typically by using currently developed natural language processing technology. So, and then if I talk about briefly about the limit of some call system right now, And then people are developing exercises and then use the multimedia files and then movie clips and then make language learning more exciting and interesting. However, current exercises are typically very limited to uncontextualized multi-choice questions. Sometimes you just click and point and click and get the right answer, and then system brings up, yes, you're right, or no, you're wrong. But it's not quite smart enough, right? And then also some feedback usually is limited yes, no, or sometimes letter by letter matching. For example, there is a quite well-known software came out called Banzai and RoboSensei. Have you heard of this software? And then developed by Nakada, actually 1996, not 2006, 1996, 2000, and then and their system actually, it was people were excited about having that kind of software for learning Japanese. Learning Japanese is very challenging, especially for language learners like native speakers of English. Japanese is typologically, it's very different. Korean is even harder. So that's why a lot of foreign learners are failing when they try to learn the language. But Banzai is actually, it's a sort of a translation-based exercise. So the system asks you translate this sentence into Japanese, and if you make an error with the Japanese particles, I'm going to explain what particles are, but it's very similar to English prepositions. So, but for language learners, it's hard to get the right particles. But so if there is something wrong with the particles, and then it gives the feedback, you are wrong. But basically, the system is one-to-one correspondence between just the translation, so sort of pattern matching between English and Japanese. So the goal actually, we think the tool must be extended and to permit sort of diagnose the errors made by language learners. So if language learners, it shouldn't be so restricted. And then language learners produce something, and then system process the input and then provide intelligent feedback according to the learner level. That's the system. That's why we use the term intelligent. And so I know it's a little bit controversial with the terminology, but that's sort of the way to go now. And then learner corpora we are developing. Basically, learner corpora means a text of the learner language, for example, and then native speakers of English, and then they can learn Korean language. And if they make produce some assignments, writing assignments, the collection of the text is called learner corpus. Okay. And then with the learner corpus, actually, there are many NLP processing actually applied with the learner data. For example, the header information can be also need to be processed. Also, in terms of the transcription level, people have to process the orthographic information. And also at the annotation level, sentence boundary disambiguation or some sort of annotation for tokenization and other lemmatization, or a simple example would be syntactic parsing and semantic parsing. That kind of annotation can be added. And then part of it actually is error tagging. So we are interested in the annotation of errors and how to mark errors efficiently, so that when we are developing the system, then by using that information, we can produce some automatic error detection method later. So usage of error annotation is actually error annotation determines what kind of language properties are underused or overused, sometimes misused. So it brings the correct learner analysis. That's why it's important. And also annotation also provides some sort of evaluation data for the system development. And error taxonomy also tells developers what type of errors to anticipate when you process learner data. And it can be used for investigating some sort of foreign language learners interlanguage in terms of the language linguistics actually, or second language acquisition part. So it has some usage in that part. And also its error analysis through error annotation can be incorporated directly into foreign language teaching practice too. But bringing actually exact correct error taxonomy is very challenging. So it's been known actually validity of the error taxonomy. It's been people thought about it and tried to provide sort of the golden standard annotation scheme. However, throughout the 1970s, actually people realized that it's impossible to have a genetic error taxonomy, because you cannot annotate the whole thing that, just working for every different tasks. So task-specific or purpose-oriented taxonomy is very necessary in this project. And also reliability of the error annotation is important, because basically annotation is done by annotators. But if annotators don't have enough background and or sort of missing some particular errors, it's after you're done with the annotation, the whole thing is useless, right? So how to maintain the high reliability is always challenging topic with the annotation task. So now, based on this one, let me talk briefly about the Korean language. Korean language is actually belongs to an agglutinative language, which means morphologically it has more complex word structure inside, and also it has a relatively free word order. And for example, complex morphological combinations can be means morphological boundaries tend to be maintained in spite of some sort of the application of phonological rule. We're going to talk about it when we talk about our spelling error project, because the spelling errors are generated with many different reasons. Sometimes, people get tired and then just physically they are not in the right condition. But many times there are some linguistic reasons why people produce certain type of errors. That's the part we are interested, right? And then verb morphology for Korean is more complex, and verbs can be actually conjugated by adding very small morphemes. But also nouns can be also composed of, it has a certain noun phrase, but noun phrases combined with the particles, which are quite similar to English prepositions. For English, actually, for English learners, as a second language learner, and then we produce a lot of preposition errors, right? So for those people who are working on the ESL and, just edit, what's the program name? You guys work? Assistant. Yeah, assistant, and then that's quite interesting topic. But for Korean, actually, particles are very similar to prepositions, but it's more complex because linguistically it has the very similar functions, but it's more connected. There is more long-distance connectivity between the Korean particles and then verb forms. So that's why, and I will explain later. And also, this is the one verb Korean, so you can see, you cannot read the Korean letters, but this is just one verb. But inside of the verb, there are small fragments. And each fragment represents tense information, sometimes mood information, and many different linguistic informations. So the verb hold is composed of 5 elements inside. And then another challenging is that each word, each character is actually representing one syllable in writing. However, when people pronounce it, the morpheme boundaries are not maintained. So you can easily see why people make a lot of spelling errors. Okay. So we will talk about it more when Seokbae is talking about spell errors. And then for Korean particles, it looks like it's very similar to English in terms of in this structure, at school. Instead of at school, Korean use school at. So it seems to be simple, but one difference is that there is no space between at and school. So their particles cannot stand alone. It's sort of considered a one word. However, it shouldn't stand alone. So identifying which one is the particle is meaning you have to get the right morpheme boundary information. So And then more things about Korean particles, actually. So there are particles play sort of represent some structural information. So English, like subject and object, can be identified in terms of the word order, right? But for Korean, there is a subject marker for after the noun phrase and an object marker. So it's very similar to Japanese. And then because of the markers and word orders are relatively flexible, because we don't need to maintain the same word order for subject and object. And then particles contribute that kind of flexibility of free word order. And also particle realization is based on verb argument structure and also semantic information. And there are also some different class of particles called topping markers, which actually deliver a lot of discourse pragmatic informations. So subject markers are sometimes replaced by topping markers, but they are under the very specific pragmatic setup. So people try to understand what kind of linguistic information that is delivered by using the topping markers. So in order to process Korean particles, you have to actually deal with from the spelling error level challenge, and then you have to deal with that high level pragmatic and semantic information also. And then let me just talk about briefly about Korean writing system. Korean writing system is it's known like it's based on the syllabic structure. So syllabic alphabet with one 음절 is a basic unit. So in English, you can identify syllables when you just hear the string of sounds automatically. So Korean actually. Korean letter system represent one syllable as one unit. But in English, it's more linear. So A, B, C, D is written like when you write just left to right. But for Korean, actually, divide the syllabic structure and then represent it in the letter system. So it's composed of three different things. Like the first one is actually 초성, which is the first sound. It can be consonant, it can be vowel, but the second sound is the 중성, which is usually the all the time vowel. And then last sound is similar to coda is 종성. So for English, if there is a hak, the sound hak, you're gonna write down H-A-K linearly, hak, right? However, for Korean system, H is represented by here on the top, there's a little symbol near beside the H sound here. And then A is represented by this symbol. And then K sound is this symbol. But when people write down, they combine it together. So instead of 기역 goes the K sound go here, like K sound appears underneath it. So it has more combinatoric structure. And then spacing is also very headache for Korean language processing. The first is that also sometimes like a particle combination doesn't allow any space between the noun phrase and then particle. But sometimes like some cases, Korean spacing rules are very redundant. It seems like you don't have the rule. Sometimes you can use the space, sometimes you don't need to use the space. That actually creates a lot of problem with the language processing part. And spacing unit is called 어절. So we call like English, for English, like we have a million word corpus, right? But for Korean, we say million 어절 corpus because it's hard to just count each word because particles, there is no space. So we just use if there is the space unit, and then one unit is called 어절. So there are million 어절 corpus. Okay. And then syllabic representation of Korean requires learner to acquire various knowledge. For example, like linguistic knowledge of syllable compositions, which one goes to where. So you know the all positional information. But also, like you need to know like some orthographic knowledge, including sound-letter relation. For example, k, g sound in Korean. Korean people don't distinguish them, so there is the mapping between these two sounds into this one letter. So they have all kind of complex information as a native speakers. So for language learners, it's really hard to match which sounds correspond to which letter. So they have to match them. And then there are two frequent errors so far. Like I've been talking about spelling errors, and also we can guess there are lots of particle errors. So those two things are our main interest for study. And then they actually, when people study the learner languages, they found that particle errors, like 24.4% errors, learners produce many particle errors, and misspelling errors are like about 20% out of all the errors the language learners produced. So that's quite high. Yeah.
So just one quick question on the last statistics. Does that ratio stay relatively constant at different proficiency levels, or does it change drastically?
I think I don't remember the whole study, but it was the final result. So they combined all different levels. But I think for each level, it's quite similar. Yeah. Yeah.
I noticed the particle errors are a very high proportion of the errors here. Yet, I don't know what the state is when I was in college, but typically it's heritage learners who are the bulk of the language learners. Are most of these not speaking Korean on their own and still making particle errors?
Yeah, actually that's connected to our also study. I'm not going to talk a lot about heritage language learning versus foreign language learning. However, we've been expecting that there will be some dramatic difference in terms of the particle errors between those two groups. Actually, what we found is statistically it's not that significant, but the patterns are not quite the same. So that's one thing we are investigating more. But that's a very interesting question. But you can see that it's not like English preposition errors. Preposition errors, I believe it will be much lower, for English, right? But for Korean particles, because of the linguistic properties of particles, the error rates are pretty high. Yeah. And then, that's done. I'm done for the background in Korean, so you don't need to, just to look at the data. But Seokbae now will talk about specifically what we did with these two projects. One is on the spelling errors, and then the other is I'm going to talk about the particles. Okay, do you want to come? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Seokbae Jang. I will introduce the very initial research about the spelling errors. The mostly spelling errors of Korean learners are generated from the lack of linguistic awareness of morphological combinations. Korean language learners tend to depend on sound. Yeah, most people think that the Korean alphabet is based on sound. That's true. So if you didn't know much about the Korean morphology, if you know the Korean spelling, you can write down the very similar sound with the Korean spelling. However, Korean orthography is based on the morphology, not phonology. So even though you can write down the similar sound using Korean spelling, Korean alphabet, however, it is very difficult to write down correct spelling rules. Yeah. That's the problem. Yeah. So mostly the spelling errors stems from lack of morphological knowledge in Korean. However, for English, the phonological confusion plays a crucial role in error production. So that's the contrastive things. Also, spelling errors are crucial to deal with in any computational system. As you know, if you cannot solve the spelling errors, it is very difficult to go up to the higher level processing. Also, it is required to developing a corpus annotated with them will allow for the development of spelling checker for learner language. Now, this is the error taxonomy in spelling errors. The annotated corpus analysis can show actual range of spelling errors of Korean learners, and it can show how each type of error is related to the linguistic knowledge. So it is related to the learner's native language, or it is related to the deficit of phonological and morphological knowledge of Korean. Yeah. We classified 5 categories of spelling errors. The first one is phonological, and the second one is morphological, typographical, and incomprehensible, and foreign word. Let's go on to the first phonological errors. Mostly, phonological errors are based on the incorrect mapping between a sound and letter. So there is big difficulties for English speakers in Korean sound. Mostly, most of Korean consonant has the three-way distinction. Can you distinguish 불, 뿔, 풀? Can you distinguish three sounds? Actually, 불, 불 is the first B sound is the plane. 불 is fire. 뿔, the tenth one, 뿔 is horn. 풀, aspirated 풀, P sound is the grass. So it is very difficult, especially for English speakers. Yeah, so lots of phonological errors came from those difficulties. In here, 예쁩니다. That means it's pretty. So in Korean, we are using the tense, the B. Okay. However, most English speakers are writing like this, just using plain B sound, 예쁩니다. Yeah. And there are also the vowel mismatch between Korean vowel system and English vowel system. Mostly O, this is O, this is O, this is U, U. So this is 노래. 노래 means song, O. However, many English speakers are writing down like 노래. So these types of errors are generally restricted to difference between Korean and English. Okay. In the previous slide, I explained the difficulties, but those difficulties came from the similarity of the sound features in Korean phonological system. However, even though there are two sounds are very long distance relationship, however, there is also confusion. In this case, so 왜, 숲, 뭐 here, 크 sound. Incorrect one is 왜, 숲, 뭐. 크 and b is very different. However, many English speakers are generated like these errors. It is most native heritage Korean speakers are not usually generated in this kind of errors. However, non-native speakers are generated like this kind of errors. Let's move on to the morphological errors. Morphological errors include the failure of morpheme identification. That is the most important thing in morphological errors. For example, 먹었습니다. The first character 먹 actually is to eat. The second 엇 is past tense. The last one 씁니다 is just the final ending. However, here there is the sound change between the tense 엇 and the second character 습. Actual pronunciation is 먹었습니다. The pronunciation is correct. However, the spelling, orthography is wrong. Okay. Also, there is the double consonant problem and overgeneralization here. The third one is the foreign word errors. Yeah. You can read this character, right? Yeah, New York. Yeah. In Korea, we have the standard form of the foreign names and place name, person name, city names. That form is New York. Okay. However, most English speakers are writing down New York, New York. Okay. This might be simple in comparison with the previous morphological and phonological errors, since if you can memorize all the foreign names used in Korean, it's okay. However, for the English speakers not familiar with the Korean text, having many difficulties in this case. There are some borderline cases. Is this phonological or is it morphological errors? To solve this problem, we decided morphological. Even though the cause of the error came from the phonological rule, though it is represented the wrong forms on the surface structure, we considered it as morphological error. Okay, our approach. We did some pilot study and then moved to the larger corpus, and we collected the 10 people corpus, 10 people per essay. So 10 students are non-heritage. That means not Korean American. And we calculated the inter-annotated agreement, and we checked with the accuracy of the existing spelling checkers. And then we did our research against the more bigger data. Okay, this came from our pilot sample, which is 10 people corpus. We calculate the kappa score for the inter-annotated agreement. The first one is the kappa score for error type. It's 0.83. It's relatively high, and the correction information. This is the correct one. This is the wrong one. Okay, each annotator put those information in the corpus, and that kappa score is 0.73. And this is feedback. This means P sound should be written with the M sound. P should be in this example. Yeah. For the feedback information, we got the 0.75 kappa. So all these scores show high correlation between two annotators. So that's positive for our research. Now I'll show some spelling checking results. The spelling checkers for Korean do not adequately handle learner errors. So our hypothesis is more morphological information needed to handle the learner's errors. Then learner errors require different error diagnostic tactics, and we also think the learner errors need to support feedback. Okay. We use 3 spelling checkers. The first one is the Korean word processor called Hangul. Its English name is HWP. It is the most popular word processor in Korea, especially. And the second one is the HAM. Actually, that's the acronym, Hangul Analysis Module. This is the most popular, the open source, actually shareware software in Korean. And the next one is the very famous your Microsoft Word 2007. And I checked the spelling results with two different sets of data. This is the low corpus, and this is the word spacing error corrected data. So mostly the spelling checkers are based on the morphological analyzing process. However, the word spacing is really the crucial point to measuring the accuracy. So with the low corpus, HWP shows the 0.71 precision and around 0.5 recall, and overall F measure is 0.62. As you can see, here, after word spacing, it still has the spelling errors, but I just corrected the spacing errors. The precision goes up to 0.92. Okay. So the overall F measure is 0.69. I think it's relatively high, but HAM version 5, it's a general purpose natural processing tool. So its precision is 0.5, and after word spacing correction, it's at 0.61. Its F measure is around 0.57 and 0.62. here, the results from MS Word 2007. As you can see, the precision is just a 0.3. And afterward, spacing correction, it goes up to the 0.65. And the recall is very high in comparison with the previous result. The reason why the precision is so low, Microsoft Word 2007 generated too many false positives. Even though it detected the erroneous string, it just showed all the spacing errors, not the actual spelling errors. Okay? That's the problem. So also HWP presents some information about the feedback. You are wrong in the standard form, or you are wrong in the first consonant, something like that, but Microsoft Word didn't give any information about it. Okay. The good thing is Microsoft Word checked some kind of grammar checker, which is honorific. However, the feedback includes lots of the wrong information. Okay, it is not, even though it represents the wrong information, it is not allowed in Korean grammar. Yeah. It's good, but it's not good sometimes.
Especially language learners, no feedback is better than wrong feedback. So we were quite interested because Microsoft Word for Korean version checked spacing error and then spelling error at the same time, and they even titled it under the same name. So we don't know whether it's a spelling error or like actual spacing errors. So many cases actually they find this spacing errors quite correctly. I was quite surprised. But most of the time when they detect it, it's all kind of spacing errors rather than spelling errors. So we thought like that's very interesting.
Okay, this is our 100 people data. We divided our corpus 4 groups. Heritage beginner, that means Korean American beginner and Korean American intermediate, and non-heritage English speakers beginner and English speakers intermediate. It's our, yeah. So we have 100 people corpus, and this is bare number, and this is the percentage of each errors. Here, M means morphological errors, and P means phonological errors. As you can see, the morphological and phonological errors are taking part of most of the errors here. Interesting is the H1 means the heritage beginner, which is Korean American beginner, generated the most number of errors here. And F2 means foreign English speakers, intermediate English speakers, generated the least number of errors. Okay, so overall, the morphological and phonological errors are very high. And this is the comparison by background. This means Korean American or not. Yeah. The difference in number is not so big. However, we can see some interesting things, especially for heritage learners. Korean Americans generated more phonological errors than morphological errors. However, the non-heritage learners generated morphological error more than phonological errors. This is a comparison by language level, the beginner and intermediate. The difference is not so big. However, the intermediate level learners generated more morphological errors. I ran the HWP spelling checkers on the 100 people data, and this means the error was detected correctly with the possible candidate. There are the multiple candidates, but even though there is one correct candidate, I checked it has candidate. Okay, the first thing is about 23%, and just detected, but there is no candidate. That case is 43%. 32% are not detected. So our goal is to increase these numbers for learners. Okay, this is the comparison between the actual examples. As you can see, this is the aspirated errors. These are tensed errors here. Especially for the tensed errors, Korean Americans intermediate level generated lots of errors here. And this is for vowel. Actually, this distinction is very difficult for native Koreans. Actually, is like in apple, apple, This is like it's like egg, This distinction is very difficult, especially current Koreans. So, lots of the errors that came here from the heritage learners, heritage intermediate learners. Okay. One more interesting is the non-heritage Korean learners, which is in the intermediate level, generate the least number of errors. Okay, this is summary so far. Yeah. With the annotated corpus of spelling errors, we can improve evaluation for particle error detection, and we can test several methods of spelling error detection to determine their effectiveness for each error type. We will try the several kind of auto-detection methods using the part of speech tagging, string similarity, and machine learning, or some statistical information. In future, we conduct the experiment to find out the most effective feedback for each type of spelling errors. And also, we need to clarify borderline case errors and the exact specific error patterns. Then we develop an efficient method to separate spacing errors and spelling errors. Okay.
And let me just go back to the particle errors, but since we are, let me just briefly go through spelling errors. We saw that sort of basic level errors generated by based on the morphological and phonological confusion. But particle errors, it's more linguistically more complex. That's the key point I'm going to talk about, because the connection is more connected to the very different level, morphology and syntax and semantics. That's the reason. So, and then we need to also consider when we when we develop the system, we have to consider the target. What's the task we are doing? And we are actually targeting writing. So writing tutors. So for writing, particle errors, particles always appear. Even though many people think Korean and Japanese, particles disappear. So sometimes teachers teach oh, you don't use them, just to use a noun phrase. However, if you drop many particles, you not actually write properly. So that's the one thing. So for our task, that's one of the things, particle errors are the main topic. Okay. And, so the taxonomy we have is we divided particle errors many different kinds. So omission is considered as a serious error. So as you may know, in anaphora resolution also, Korean pronouns disappear. However, instead of English using he and she, people drop the subject, right? So for annotation, for anaphora thing and recovering missing element is the major task. With Korean particles, we have the same issue. Particles disappear, we have to insert them back. So how to insert them back? Because we have the verb information. Basically, what we need is the verb argument structure information. So if we develop the full list of the verb argument structure, that would be very helpful. So that's one thing we are doing. But also there are other types like replacement, adding, and more formation errors. So, and then there are some guiding principles we've developed with respect to particle errors. But let me just skip this one quickly and then move on to basically, before we finish it, this is the after we did the error markup, and then we extracted the error rules so that we can use later in order to search the errors. So this is the extracted rules example. And then when error appears, actually, it would be great if we find a single type of error. However, errors are overlapped. So how to deal with the overlapping errors is one of the major tasks, and then also how to connect them together. is another challenge. And then with the particle errors, we did also similar study with like we distinguished the learner groups into heritage learners and then foreign learners, and then try to find out some of the significant results. But unfortunately, so far, statistically it's not quite meaningful. But we realized that it's more like a pattern internal analysis. Like those heritage learners produce the different types of errors. Okay. And then the findings, like some of the finding with the particles, like it occurs across different learner level, and also error taking needs to be matched with the feedback processes. So when we develop the whole annotation frame, we can actually, when we annotate it, we can match it to the feedback system. So for example, so when we produce the feedback, we have to think of the learner level too. We're not going to deliver all the complex linguistic information to the beginning level learners. They will all disappear then, So for beginning levels, we need to provide a simple answer. However, for the higher level learners, they are more curious why they are making those errors. So we are trying to divide the learner level and then divide the annotation level too. That's another task we are working on. And let me skip some of the results. And then for automatic processing, actually, Marcus is focusing on developing parsers. So he and his colleague is developing, because we don't need a really deep down parser. We need a really shallow level parsing. So he's working on Korean dependency parser geared toward the particle errors. And also, for machine learning part, this is actually, I know you guys, some of you are working on this issue, but for Korean, data sparsity is the major issue. And then, we are actually very, very grounding level. So we just have started to work on it. But for the next level, we want to obtain sort of a broad range of the data by using the web corpus. One student's actually wrote a paper on it over the summer. And then also we want to have some model of correct Korean usage, and also explore using small topic-specific web corpora. And also extract the contextual features to predict the correct particle usage will be another task. And also, as Michael did with the English preposition, and you guys use the language model for doing the machine learning system. So, and then Joel, Tetreault, and Chodorow, and use the ME feature, maximum entropy feature, for developing their own system.
We actually use both.
Oh,
so we use MaxEnt first, and then we have the results second, vetted by the language model.
Yeah. So since we have that some examples from the English, although language type is very different, we are thinking of the similar, adopting similar method and then doing the experiments more. That's the next thing we are doing. Okay, so summary is that, the key point is that we want to highlight that linguistic awareness actually plays a crucial role in the, not only in the language learning, but when we process the language errors, because without knowing that phonological difference and then morphological distinction play a crucial role in the error detection, it's really hard. It's a hard task. So, and also by building up annotated learner corpus, we want to provide a platform for the research that can be applied to many different fields. Sometimes some people working on language acquisition, they will use for learner analysis, and also for NLP part, and then people will use it for automatic analysis of learner language. And also, we realize that our annotation scheme and guideline cannot, be very comprehensive. So we have to be very specific, and we have to define the task, the property of task, and then consider the effectiveness of the feedback attached to the annotation scheme. So that's the one thing. And then complex errors, including verbal ending, space errors, lexical selection errors, need to be ultimately incorporated into the system. But that's the next level issue, how to incorporate all different annotation part. And then future work, so we're going to expand the learner corpus with annotation for particles and some problematic language constructions, and also make the annotation corpus publicly available. that's the thing. We're going to publish the annotated corpus, and which can be used by many people. And also for automatic processing, we need to integrate annotation with other type of annotation by using some multi-layer annotation scheme. And then also we need to develop the annotation tools that can mark particular errors, but also you can add more error annotations, overlapping information. And then also that tool should be flexible enough to mark the long distance relation too. So that's another thing we are working on. And then investigating some efficient learner-oriented feedback module, learner module. So, but that's probably the last step we're gonna head for. So, okay, so that's the whole summary. And then we actually, it's like I confess that we didn't produce actual things, but we started to just work on the issue, and then that's the way to go. That's the purpose of this today's talk. Yeah.
If you have questions, should definitely make sure that every question gets answered.
With the spelling errors, and particularly errors that relate to the gap between pronunciation, syllabification during pronunciation, and morphology. How much of that is actually handled often by the conversion? I mean, I've poked around with the Microsoft one, but not very extensively. But what about the what is it? The HWP? That has its own input mode editor, right? The IME that allows you to insert Korean text.
Yeah, their internal engines came from the research group in Busan University. The Professor Kwon is the investigated the Korean part of his speech tagging problem over 15 years, as I know. So mostly their engines came from those labs. So that's the reason why ASW has the highest score. But as I know, they're using some the pre-existing dictionary matching and also some the algorithms to correct the bu and bu distinction. It's very simple, but this is very difficult for foreign learners. However, the correction, automatic correction is simple. The bu and bu is assigned into the same key. So the errors between the bu and bu is easily corrected by some statistical models. Yeah. So I think you guys easily can catch up the gaps.
Yeah, just a little bit of linguistic information would be helpful.
A lot of these errors seem to be the sort of thing that gateway can be prevented earlier on. If a non-native speaker misanalyzes the what was the example? Not if you get the wrong. Well, actually, that's the vowel case.
Yeah.
If you get a syllabification case where the final, if it's something like dehakeso, where you've got the K needs to go underneath, and the at the input stage, that should be being detected in theory.
That's the Korean automata.
So it seems to be that some of this it depends on the quality of the input mode, doesn't it?
I was surprised. So you had numbers something like 30% or something of learner errors were not caught by one of the spell checkers. I mean, I'm surprised that any errors are not caught. I mean, because generally spell checkers that we make at least flag everything unless we put them into the left in some way. So are they words that were, when you say they weren't caught, is that they're words that were not appropriate but they happen to be spelled correctly? Or what were they? I mean, were they words that just, the intention was wrong, but it was actually a word? Or were they just gaps in the spell checker?
I'm not sure, but I'm guessing that the spelling checkers in the Microsoft Word is just focusing between the statistical models, like bigram syllables, like that.
I don't think it's that sophisticated.
Yeah.
I've seen the code.
It's very
I I'm just surprised it's not flagging everything by default.
But conjecturing just using with the output, I guess the Microsoft Word is very good to distinguish the word boundary, actually Azure boundary. However, it's not very good to investigate the actual error point in a word.
I was surprised actually whatever dictionary they use, like proper names are like the HWP has a much better dictionary because those are most errors like with the proper names they all bring like there is a spelling error and without presenting candidates. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure the Microsoft Speller is a whole bunch of hand-coded rules for spacing errors. But I thought it also did something with that. Maybe that's all they tried to do.
I think the word break is at work.
It uses a. Yeah. The same person did both of them. They're both related, sort of. But
Yeah, maybe I think the Microsoft was focusing on the native speakers writing, not for the learners writing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the size of the sample groups are pretty nice, but it would seem like there'd be huge opportunities if some of these tools were available on the web that you could be getting numbers in the tens of thousands instead of in the tens or hundreds. Is there anyone doing research where they basically are creating tools that learners can use on the web and then they get those size of data sets to learn from?
Yeah, actually there's a huge corpus in Korean government, which is called the Sejong National Corpus Project. They have over 100 million raw corpus, and we can use it. However, we have
100 million what?
100 million corpus.
yeah, it's not a learner's corpus, right?
Yeah, it's not learner's corpus. Yeah, but collecting the learner's data is very difficult, especially for the, as you know, it is related to the IRB approval, and sometimes the beginner level learners are just generated just 2 or 5 sentences writing in the 100 level, 200 level. So we are focusing to make a balance between each groups, as you know, the healthy beginner and non-healthy beginner, healthy intermediate and non-healthy intermediate.
Are you talking about the learner corpus available on the web and then just capturing the data?
I'm talking about, I mean, it seems like, right, there are language learning tools online, and anytime someone's using them, they're making errors. And they would have data on tens of thousands of users rather than on tens of users. And it would seem like that would be a very rich data set, and I'm wondering whether anyone's actually making use of that.
Exam data, you know, which question they make the most of the errors and stuff like that. Yeah.
But he's mentioning like if if the tool is available, you know, they produce language learning, produce lots of data. But that also like practically it's hard to get access to the engine and then get the permission to collect all the data, which is possible. But you know, we actually started to think about, because language for our task we thought that learner information is very important. But normally, if we based on like a web-based that kind of exercises, we cannot keep the correct record of the data learner information. So for the research purpose, we started the collection by doing the sort of hand collecting the data. We do actually very sophisticated background research. We developed this like a language questionnaire, background check, how many years they studied, what kind of language their parents used, and how they communicate when they talk back to the parents. Sometimes they talk in English just. So because that's how like in the later when we develop the system, and we can get sort of like get into the right track rather than like collecting all learner data without knowing whose data they are. So that's one of the concern we haven't actually considered. But because of the data sparsity problem, actually, the students who had the idea about creating web corpus actually used some tools to collecting just the massive data. So that's another way of doing it too. But in the end, Marcus has a better idea about in what direction he and his students will do the research in that direction. But we are more like more like linguistics based on like annotation, like just groundwork based research right now.
In whatever is the predominant search engine in Korea, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's a Korean search engine, right? That is
Naver,
do you know what they do in terms of spelling correction for search?
As I know, mostly the information retrieval area, they use the ham.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ham is very fast. Or, as I know, there are around 5 or 6 groups who is doing the research in the morphological analyzer, and Naver used the ham engine before, and in these days they changed it. I heard that. Downsoft is also good.
Okay, but they use tools like that. They don't use like query data to train up. Thank you.